long before humanity looked toward the stars, before the Covenant united countless alien civilizations beneath a shared faith, and before even the name Master Chief became synonymous with hope, the Milky Way belonged to powers whose histories had already begun to fade into legend. Their civilizations rose and fell so many millennia before recorded human history that even the greatest scholars of later ages struggled to separate memory from myth. Yet, the choices they made would echo across millions of years, shaping every conflict that followed. Among the oldest beings known to have existed were the precursors. Their origins remain uncertain even within Halo's deepest records. Some traditions describe them as explorers who wandered from galaxy to galaxy, while others portray them as architects who cultivated life wherever they traveled. What remains broadly accepted is that they possessed technologies and understanding that surpassed every civilization that would come after them. To later species, they seemed almost divine, not because they demanded worship, but because their command over life itself appeared limitless. The precursors believed that intelligent life should not remain static. Civilizations would rise, inherit responsibility, eventually decline, and give way to others in an endless cycle of renewal. Central to this philosophy was the concept later known as the mantle of responsibility. It was less a position of rulership than one of stewardship, placing upon its bearer the obligation to protect and nurture life throughout the galaxy. For countless ages, the precursors judged which species would one day inherit this mantle. Their decision would ultimately ignite one of history's greatest tragedies. During that distant era, the Forerunners emerged as an exceptionally gifted civilization. Brilliant engineers, explorers, and builders, they spread across the galaxy with astonishing speed. Their worlds became monuments to scientific achievement, and their mastery over artificial intelligence, stellar engineering, and slip space travel appeared almost without limit. The Forerunners came to believe that they were destined to inherit the mantle. Their accomplishments seemed to justify such confidence. Yet, when the precursors finally rendered their judgment, they chose another species entirely. That species was ancient humanity. Why the precursors favored humanity has never been fully explained. Some accounts suggest they saw within humanity a greater capacity for adaptation and compassion. Others imply they valued qualities that could not be measured through technological achievement alone. Whatever their reasoning, the decision shattered the assumptions upon which Forerunner civilization had been built. Unable to accept what they regarded as an injustice, many Forerunners rebelled. Armed with technologies gifted by the precursors themselves, the Forerunners turned those creations against their makers. Precursors were hunted across the galaxy, their civilization dismantled until only scattered remnants survived. Some escaped beyond known space, others chose a stranger path. Seeking to preserve themselves for a distant future, many precursors transformed their living bodies into a fine organic dust, intended to regenerate them over immense stretches of time. Yet the ages were longer than anticipated. The dust decayed, it changed, and something fundamental within it became corrupted. What had once been intended as preservation slowly became something else entirely. In time, that corruption would awaken as the flood. For thousands of years afterward, the Forerunners ruled uncontested. Their empire reached nearly every corner of the galaxy. They gradually came to regard themselves as the rightful custodians of the mantle they had once stolen. Monumental installations floated between stars. Artificial worlds sustained impossible ecosystems. Entire planets were reshaped according to carefully ordered designs. Their society was rigidly organized into specialized ranks. Builders designed magnificent structures. Warrior servants defended the ecumeny. Life workers preserved biological diversity. Every citizen existed within an intricate hierarchy that had endured for countless generations. While the Forerunners prospered, humanity also expanded. Ancient humanity spread across hundreds of worlds and developed into a formidable interstellar civilization in its own right. Though less technologically advanced than the Forerunners, humans became resilient explorers, soldiers, and diplomats whose territories increasingly bordered those of the older empire. For a time, the two civilizations coexisted uneasily. But then, a new terror emerged. Reports began arriving from distant colonies describing entire worlds consumed by an unfamiliar parasite. Organisms previously thought harmless had transformed into ravenous creatures, capable of infecting nearly any living host. Once infected, victims ceased to exist as individuals. Their bodies became extensions of a growing collective intelligence. The flood had come. Recognizing the danger sooner than their rivals, ancient humanity launched an aggressive military campaign against infected regions. Entire colonies were abandoned or destroyed in desperate attempts to halt the flood's advance. As their borders contracted, human fleets withdrew through territories claimed by the Forerunners. To the Forerunners, this appeared as a naked act of aggression. World after world fell under human attack. Colonies were vanishing. Entire populations were displaced. The true purpose behind humanity's actions remained hidden to the Forerunners. And thus, believing themselves under assault, they declared war upon ancient humanity. It became one of the greatest conflicts ever fought between intelligent civilizations. Despite humanity's determination, the technological superiority of the Forerunners proved overwhelming. Human worlds gradually fell. Their fleets were annihilated. Leaders were captured. When the war finally ended, humanity stood defeated. But rather than exterminating them, the Forerunners chose another punishment. Human civilization was dismantled, its technology stripped away, its history deliberately erased. Surviving humans were genetically altered and returned to primitive worlds, where they would begin again from near extinction. Their descendants would eventually forget that they had once ruled among the stars. Only after humanity had fallen did the terrible truth emerge. The flood had never been fleeing humanity. Humanity had been fleeing the flood, and the parasite soon turned its attention fully toward the Forerunner Empire. What followed was unlike any conventional war. Every defeat strengthened the enemy. Every battlefield became a source of new soldiers. Every fallen world expanded the parasite's intelligence until individual outbreaks merged into vast grave mines capable of strategy, manipulation, and frightening patience. But the flood did not just consume the enemies around them. They absorbed the memories of the fallen, knowledge, experience. Entire civilizations disappeared into a single collective consciousness. Even the Forerunners, masters of almost unimaginable technology, found themselves slowly losing control. Entire sectors vanished. Shield worlds fell silent. The communication networks collapsed. The warrior servants fought with unmatched courage, but every victory came at tremendous cost. Each soldier who fell risked becoming another weapon in the flood's endless advance. As defeat became increasingly inevitable, the Forerunners searched desperately for alternatives. One proposal eclipsed all other in both ambition and horror. If the flood required intelligent life in order to survive, then perhaps every suitable host would simply have to disappear. The responsibility for carrying out this terrible solution fell largely to the isodidact. Born stellar makes eternal lasting, together with the librarian, who devoted herself to preserving countless species that still remained. Across the galaxy, immense rings had already been constructed in secret. These were the Halo installations. Contrary to what many would later believe, they were never intended as conventional weapons. They were instruments of extinction. When activated together, the Halo array would release a pulse capable of destroying all sentient life complex enough to sustain flood infection across the entire galaxy. The parasite itself would remain, but deprived of hosts, it would slowly perish. The cost would be beyond comprehension. The Forerunners understood they were preparing to erase their own civilization alongside nearly every other intelligent species in existence. Before that day arrived, the librarian undertook one final act of preservation. Using vast repositories known as conservation measures, she cataloged and safeguarded the genetic legacy of countless races. Humanity, despite its ancient conflict with the Forerunners, occupied a place of special importance within her plans. She believed humanity would eventually inherit the mantle that the Forerunners had failed to uphold. And when every alternative had been exhausted, the order was finally given. The Halo array fired, and across the galaxy, civilizations vanished in an instant. The flood starved. The Forerunners accepted the extinction of their own people, believing they had forfeited any claim to rule through the choices that had led them there. Those few survivors who remained departed the galaxy entirely. Silence settled across worlds that had once been filled with life. Then, slowly, life returned. Using the preserved genetic archives, automated systems began reseeding countless species upon their ancestral worlds. Humanity once again awoke on Earth with no memory of the ancient empire it had lost. Other races likewise began anew, unaware that they walked among the ruins of civilizations older than imagination. The Halo installations remained hidden, and deep beneath forgotten worlds, Forerunner machines waited for visitors who would not arrive for another 100,000 years. The galaxy had been given a second beginning, but it would not remain peaceful forever. Far from Earth, another civilization was already beginning its own rise. One that would unite diverse species beneath a single religion, searching endlessly for the sacred relics left behind by the Forerunners, and unknowingly set humanity upon a collision course with a destiny first written millions of years before the birth of a boy named John. When humanity returned to the stars, it did so without any memory of the civilization it had once been. The ancient empire that had challenged the Forerunners had vanished with the firing of the Halo Array. Its worlds lay forgotten beneath layers of geological change, its greatest cities reduced to dust long before the first written languages appeared on Earth. Humanity's second beginning was far humbler. Across thousands of generations, civilizations rose and fell in familiar patterns until, through curiosity and perseverance, rather than inherited knowledge, mankind once again looked beyond its home world. By the 21st century, humanity had begun establishing a permanent presence beyond Earth. The moon became home to research stations and industrial facilities. Mars, once little more than a distant red point in the night sky, gradually transformed into a thriving center of engineering and scientific development. These early colonies demanded cooperation on a scale unlike anything seen before, encouraging Earth's nations to think less as rivals and more as participants in a shared future. That process was neither simple nor immediate. Political disagreements remained, and conflicts continued to emerge between competing powers. Yet the growing realization that humanity's future lay among the stars slowly encouraged greater unity. This new era culminated in the formation of the United Nations Space Command, commonly known as the UNSC. Although originally established as a military organization, the UNSC soon became one of humanity's most influential governing institutions, overseeing exploration, defense, and the security of ever-expanding colonies. Alongside it, it operated the Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, whose responsibilities extended far beyond traditional intelligence gathering. ONI would eventually become one of the most secretive and powerful organizations in human history, shaping events from the shadows in ways few citizens ever realized. Humanity's greatest leap forward came with the perfection of slip space travel. Unlike conventional propulsion, which remained constrained by the vast distances between stars, slip space allowed ships to traverse dimensions beyond normal space, dramatically shortening voyages that would otherwise require generations. Although early drives were inefficient compared to the technologies once possessed by the Forerunners, they represented an extraordinary achievement by human standards. New worlds became reachable. New colonies appeared every year. What began as isolated settlements gradually expanded into hundreds of inhabited systems, scattered across nearby regions of the Orion Arm. Some of these colonies remained closely connected to Earth and the inner planets. Wealth flowed freely between them, supporting advanced industries, universities, and shipyards that rivaled those of the Sol system itself. These became known as the inner colonies, prosperous worlds that enjoyed stable governments and regular military protection. Farther from the Earth's influence lay the outer colonies. These distant settlements often existed at the edge of explored space, where communication delays and long supply routes fostered a greater sense of independence. Life there demanded resilience. Colonists transformed harsh alien environments into productive farms, mining worlds, and manufacturing centers through years of determined labor. Communities developed their own identities and political outlooks, increasingly viewing themselves as separate from the governments that claimed authority over them. For many settlers, the UNSC had once represented opportunity, but over time, it increasingly came to symbolize a distant bureaucracy. Taxes funded projects light years away. Resources left the outer colonies, while comparatively little returned. Military governors, trade regulations, and centralized authority often appeared disconnected from the realities of frontier life. And thus, discontent slowly grew. Not every colony desired separation, but enough began questioning Earth's authority that organized resistance gradually emerged. Some movements sought greater political representation through peaceful means. Others embraced sabotage and armed rebellion. These conflicts collectively became known as the insurrection. Unlike the Great Wars that would later engulf the galaxy, the insurrection was not fought between different species or competing civilizations. It was simply humanity struggling against itself. Bombings became more common, military convoys disappeared, colonial governments fractured. The UNSC responded with deployments of Marines and increasingly aggressive counterinsurgency operations. Each escalation deepened resentment, convincing many colonists that peaceful reconciliation was becoming impossible. To Oni, the situation posed a terrifying question. If humanity continued down this path, would it ultimately destroy itself before ever encountering another intelligent civilization? Among those tasked with answering that question was one of the most brilliant scientific minds of her generation. Dr. Catherine Elizabeth Halsey possessed an intellect that few could rival. A gifted geneticist, engineer, researcher, she viewed problems through an unusually detached lens, often pursuing solutions others considered ethically impossible. While many military leaders proposed larger fleets or harsher security measures, Halsey believed the crisis required something entirely different. Humanity, she concluded, needed soldiers unlike any who had existed before. Earlier attempts to create enhanced commandos had been met with limited success. The Spartan-I program produced capable individuals, but failed to deliver the revolutionary improvements its designers envisioned. The later Spartan-III program had not yet been conceived. Halsey's proposal became the Spartan-II program. Officially, the project did not exist. Its funding disappeared beneath layers of classified budgets. Its facilities were hidden from public records. Even within the UNSC, only a select handful knew its true purpose. The program's foundation rested upon an idea so morally troubling that it would remain controversial long after the Human Covenant War had ended. Rather than recruiting adult volunteers, Halsey sought children. Using extensive genetic screening across billions of citizens, her team searched for candidates possessing rare combinations of physical aptitude, intelligence, psychological resilience, and compatibility with future biological augmentation. The criteria were extraordinarily strict. Out of countless possibilities, only 75 children were ultimately selected. One of them was a 6-year-old boy living on the colony world of Eridanus II. His name was John. Even as a child, John demonstrated unusual qualities. He possessed a natural competitiveness, remarkable confidence, and an instinctive ability to inspire cooperation among other children. During games, he often assumed leadership without demanding it. Others simply found themselves following his example. To Dr. Halsey, these traits were impossible to ignore. And in the year 2517, Oni initiated one of the darkest operations in human history. Each selected child was secretly abducted. Their disappearances were carefully concealed through the use of flash-cloned replacements, genetically identical copies engineered to survive only a short time before succumbing to rapid medical failure. Families mourned children they believed had died from sudden illness, never learning the full truth. The ethical burden of this deception would haunt many involved for the remainder of their lives. The children themselves understood almost nothing of what had happened. Transported to the hidden military world of Reach, they were informed only that they had been chosen to serve humanity in a way no one else could. Their precious lives ended almost overnight. Their new home became the isolated training facilities of Reach's FleetCom military reservation. Awaiting them there was Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez. Mendez possessed decades of military experience and an uncompromising belief in discipline. His responsibility extended far beyond teaching combat techniques. He intended to transform frightened children into soldiers capable of surviving impossible circumstances. The process began immediately. The recruits learned tactics, mathematics, engineering, history, survival, languages, and leadership alongside relentless physical conditioning. Every lesson reinforced the idea that individual success mattered far less than collective achievement. John distinguished himself almost immediately. He was not always the strongest recruit, nor the fastest, nor the smartest in every discipline. What separated him from the others was his remarkable ability to make decisions under pressure while earning the confidence of those around him. When faced with difficult choices, hesitation rarely entered his thinking. Failure became an opportunity to improve rather than an excuse. Most importantly, he accepted responsibility not only for himself, but for everyone under his command. Mendez noticed, and so did Dr. Halsey. Friendships naturally developed among the trainees, despite the severity of their environment. Kelly's astonishing speed, Fred's calm reliability, Linda's extraordinary marksmanship, Samuel's quiet strength, and several others gradually formed bonds that would last throughout their lives. Together with John, they became known as Blue Team, though at the time they were simply children enduring these same impossible circumstances. Their instructors encouraged competition while reinforcing cooperation. Victory achieved alone meant little. Success accomplished together became everything. Years passed. The children grew into disciplined adolescents whose abilities already exceeded those of fully trained adult soldiers. And then came the greatest test of all. When the Spartan candidates reached the age of 14, they underwent a series of experimental augmentation procedures designed to elevate them beyond ordinary human limitations. Every operation carried tremendous risk. Artificial ceramic ossification strengthened bones until they became nearly unbreakable. Muscular enhancement increased strength to unprecedented levels. Neurological implants accelerated reflexes to astonishing speeds. Retinal improvement sharpened vision beyond normal human capability. Yet success was never guaranteed. Some candidates died during surgery. Others survived only to suffer permanent physical or neurological disabilities. Friends who had trained together for years disappeared overnight. Those who remained carried the memory of every absence. The survivors emerged transformed. They could run faster than vehicles traveling through city streets, lift weights no ordinary human could hope to move, react within fractions of a second, operate for days with minimal rest. Still, Dr. Halsey never considered the augmentations alone to be her greatest achievement. The Spartans had become exceptional because their years of discipline, teamwork, and leadership had shaped minds capable of matching their enhanced bodies. Soon afterward, another revolutionary technology reached maturity. Using advanced energy shielding, reactive circuits, hydrostatic gel layers, and neural interfaces, engineers developed the first generation of Mjolnir-powered assault armor. Without augmentation, wearing such armor would kill an ordinary human. Its movements amplified physical strength so dramatically that unenhanced muscles and bones could not survive the feedback. For Spartans, however, the armor became a natural extension of themselves. Their strengths multiplied yet again. Reaction times improved further still. Energy shielding provided protection against weapons that would instantly kill conventional soldiers. Within their armor, the Spartan-IIs became the most capable warriors humanity had ever produced. Originally, they had been created to end a civil conflict, but history would deny them that purpose. Even as the Spartans completed their training, humanity unknowingly approached a far greater crisis. Far beyond the outer colonies, another civilization had spent centuries searching for the sacred remnants of the Forerunners. To its people, those ancient ruins represented the path toward divine transcendence. To humanity, they were simply mysterious relics waiting to be understood. Neither civilization yet realized they were destined to meet. When that meeting finally came on the agricultural world of harvest, it would bring an end to humanity's brief age of expansion and begin a war that would consume entire star systems. For John 117 and the Spartans, every lesson learned on Reach was about to face the only examination that truly mattered: the survival of the human race itself. By the middle of the 26th century, humanity had grown confident in its place among the stars. Hundreds of colonies stretched across explored space. Trade routes connected distant systems. And despite the continuing insurrection, there remained a widespread belief that mankind's future was one of continued expansion. The Spartans had been created to preserve that future by restoring stability among humanity's own worlds. No one involved in the program imagined they would soon become the last line of defense against an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The first meeting came in the year 2525 in the agricultural colony of Harvest. Harvest was an unremarkable world in many respects. Fertile soil and favorable conditions made it one of humanity's most productive farming colonies, supplying food to worlds across UNSC space. Its distance from Earth also made it one of the frontier's quieter settlements, far removed from the political tensions that had begun to divide the colonies. That quiet existence ended when an alien vessel entered the system. The civilization aboard belonged to an interstellar alliance known as the Covenant. For centuries, the Covenant had united numerous species beneath a shared religious doctrine centered upon the ancient Forerunners. Their prophets taught that the Forerunners had achieved divine transcendence through an event they called the Great Journey. Every relic left behind by that vanished civilization was regarded as sacred, and recovering those relics had become one of the Covenant's highest callings. When Covenant surveyors encountered Harvest, they discovered something their beliefs could not explain. Forerunner systems repeatedly identified humans as inheritors and rightful reclaimers of ancient technology. To the Covenant's leadership, this revelation represented a crisis of faith. If humanity possessed a legitimate connection to the Forerunners, then the foundations upon which the Covenant had been built could collapse. The authority of the three high prophets depended upon the belief that they alone interpreted the will of the gods. Rather than revealing this truth, the prophets concealed it. Humanity was declared an affront to the Forerunners, and its very existence became viewed as heresy. The solution they embraced was absolute. Humanity would be exterminated. And without warning, Covenant warships opened fire upon Harvest. Cities disappeared beneath orbital bombardments. Agricultural regions that had sustained millions were transformed into fields of molten glass as plasma scorched the planet's surface. Survivors who managed to escape described weapons unlike anything human science had ever produced. Ships capable of crossing interstellar distances with ease. Energy shields that rendered conventional weapons nearly useless. Directed plasma capable of reducing entire structures to liquid fire. The UNSC initially believed Harvest had fallen victim to a large-scale insurrectionist attack or some unknown technological catastrophe. When human naval forces finally arrived, they discovered an enemy whose capabilities exceeded their own in almost every category. The Battle of Harvest became humanity's first major engagement against the Covenant. It also became its first devastating defeat. The disparity between the two civilizations quickly became apparent. Human ships relied upon magnetic accelerator cannons, missiles, and conventional nuclear weapons. Against one another, these systems had long represented the pinnacle of naval warfare. Covenant vessels carried layered energy shielding capable of absorbing extraordinary punishment before their hulls were even exposed. Their plasma torpedoes burned through armor that had once been considered nearly indestructible. In ship-to-ship combat, humanity often required several vessels working together to destroy a single Covenant cruiser. Meanwhile, one enemy ship could obliterate entire human task forces. The war that followed would last 27 years. Throughout that conflict, humanity fought almost entirely on the defensive. The Covenant possessed no interest in negotiation, no territorial demands, no political objectives beyond extinction. Whenever a human colony was discovered, invasion followed. Those worlds that resisted were eventually subjected to orbital glassing, a process in which concentrated plasma bombardment melted the planet's surface into vast sheets of blackened, vitrified earth. Entire cities vanished beneath oceans of fire. Forests became deserts of glass, stretching beyond the horizon. One by one, colonies disappeared from human star charts. Each loss forced the survivors inward toward Earth's increasingly strained defenses. The UNSC recognized that conventional military doctrine alone could not halt the Covenant's advance. Instead, victory often depended upon delaying inevitable defeat. Every successful evacuation, every convoy that escaped, every month purchased through desperate resistance allowed humanity to continue fighting. Within these impossible circumstances, the Spartans found their true purpose. Although originally trained to suppress insurrectionists, they rapidly became humanity's most effective soldiers against the Covenant. Their enhanced strength allowed them to battle Sangheili warriors on nearly equal terms. Their tactical discipline enabled them to complete missions conventional forces considered impossible. Among them, John 117 gradually emerged as the figure around whom many of humanity's greatest victories revolved. But he never sought recognition. Within official military reports, his actions appeared as concise mission summaries and casualty figures. Yet Marines who served alongside him remembered something different. They remembered impossible rescues, defensive lines that somehow held after all hope had vanished, evacuations completed because one Spartan refused to abandon those still fighting. Stories spread from one fleet to another. Some claimed Master Chief had survived impossible odds through sheer determination. Others insisted he possessed extraordinary luck. Dr. Halsey herself once remarked that luck had always been one of John's defining characteristics. Whether confidence or something more difficult to explain, he repeatedly found opportunities where others saw only defeat. As the war intensified, additional Spartan operations targeted Covenant supply lines, intelligent facilities, and strategic installations across occupied space. Blue Team frequently undertook missions whose success remained classified even decades later. John rarely operated alone. Kelly's speed, Fred's measured judgment, Linda's unmatched precision, and the skills of countless other Spartans repeatedly proved essential. Together, they accomplished missions that ordinary soldiers could scarcely comprehend. Yet the Covenant's numerical superiority remained overwhelming. Every victory won by the Spartans delayed the inevitable rather than reversing it. Among the Covenant itself, humanity gradually came to occupy a curious place. The Sangheili, or elites, respected courage regardless of species. Though they regarded humans as enemies deserving destruction, many elite commanders privately admired the determination displayed by UNSC forces. The Geralhanai, later known to humanity as brutes, approached warfare differently. Brutal and direct, they sought domination through overwhelming force and delighted in crushing resistance wherever it appeared. The Kigyar, called jackals by human troops, often served as scouts and marksmen, while the smaller Ungyoi, known as grunts, formed the backbone of Covenant infantry, despite frequently displaying fear when separated from stronger leadership. Towering Lekgolo colonies operated heavy assault armor that humanity classified as hunters, presenting some of the most physically imposing opponents encountered during the war. Though diverse in appearance and culture, these species remained united beneath Covenant religion. Most sincerely believed they fought a holy war, but only the prophets understood its true origins. As the years passed, Oni struggled to understand how the Covenant consistently located human colonies. Despite careful navigation protocols, worlds continued falling with alarming regularity. The answer eventually came through one of humanity's most remarkable achievements: artificial intelligence. Among the UNSC's most advanced, smart AIs was Cortana. Created using a cloned neural template derived from Dr. Catherine Halsey's own brain, Cortana possessed extraordinary analytical abilities, rapid learning capacity, and a personality unlike any previous military intelligence. She displayed curiosity, wit, confidence, and a willingness to challenge authority whenever she believed a better solution existed. Unlike most military personnel, Cortana never viewed Master Chief merely as a weapon. She came to know John as a person. Likewise, John soon discovered that Cortana's brilliance extended beyond strategy or computation. She became an advisor, partner, and eventually his closest companion. Their first major assignment together involved one of Oni's most ambitious operations, Operation Red Flag. The plan reflected humanity's increasingly desperate position. Rather than attempting to defeat the Covenant militarily, the Spartans would infiltrate Covenant territory, capture one of the High Prophets, and force negotiations through the threat of execution. It was a mission of extraordinary risk. Before it could begin, events overtook the planners. The Covenants had finally located Reach. Second only to Earth itself, Reach served as humanity's greatest military fortress. Vast shipyards orbited the planet. Training academies prepared generations of officers. Beneath its surface lay classified research facilities, Spartans' training grounds, and Oni headquarters. Its defenses ranked among the strongest ever constructed by humanity. Even so, they proved insufficient. In the summer of 2552, an immense Covenant fleet emerged from slipspace. The Battle of Reach became one of the largest military engagements in human history. Orbital defense platforms destroyed numerous enemy vessels. UNSC warships fought with extraordinary determination. Spartan teams launched operation after operation in an effort to delay the invasion. Yet the Covenant continued arriving in overwhelming numbers. Space superiority gradually slipped away. Planetary defenses collapsed. Cities burned beneath relentless bombardment. Reach, once regarded as humanity's secure military heart, began to die. Amid the chaos, Captain Jacob Keyes prepared the cruiser Pillar of Autumn for departure. His orders came directly from the recently revised Cole Protocol. Rather than risk leading the Covenant to Earth, ships escaping destroyed colonies were required to perform random slipspace jumps into unexplored regions. Aboard the Autumn traveled several individuals whose futures would become inseparable. Captain Keyes, Dr. Halsey, Cortana, and John 117. Before departing, Cortana incorporated navigational data recovered from an ancient Forerunner artifact discovered beneath Reach. The coordinates pointed toward a location whose significance remained unknown. As Covenant forces overwhelmed the final defenses, the Pillar of Autumn escaped into slipspace. Behind it, Reach continued to burn. For humanity, the loss demonstrated that even its strongest fortress could fall, and Earth now stood dangerously exposed. The survivors aboard the Autumn had no expectation of discovering salvation. They believed they were simply fleeing from annihilation. Instead, they were unknowingly traveling toward one of the greatest secrets left behind by the Forerunners. A vast ring world hidden among the stars. A place the Covenant revered as sacred. A place whose true purpose neither civilization yet understood. The next chapter of humanity's struggle would begin there, upon a world known simply as Halo. When the Pillar of Autumn emerged from slipspace, its crew expected only a brief respite from pursuit. Instead, they found themselves drifting beneath one of the greatest engineering achievements ever created. Suspended against the darkness of space was an immense ring, curving upward until its distant horizon disappeared into the sky itself. Mountains, forests, rivers, and oceans stretched across its inner surface, illuminated by an artificial sun suspended at its center. From a distance, it resembled an impossible world folded into a perfect circle. Neither Captain Keyes nor his officers knew what they had discovered. To the Covenant, however, there was no uncertainty. The ring was one of the sacred relics left behind by the Forerunners. They called it Halo. The Covenant fleet that had followed the Pillar of Autumn wasted no time launching its assault. Vastly outnumbered and unable to withstand prolonged engagement, Captain Keyes ordered the evacuation of his ship before it could be destroyed. Drop pods and lifeboats scattered toward the ring's surface. Among those escaping was John 117. Before abandoning ship, Cortana separated herself from the Autumn systems and entered the Master Chief's neural interface. Captain Keyes understood the danger of allowing such an advanced artificial intelligence to fall into Covenant hands. Cortana carried classified military information, navigation records, and strategic knowledge that could reveal Earth's location, captured. From that moment forward, she would remain with the Master Chief. The Pillar of Autumn crashed upon Halo's surface shortly afterward, its shattered hull becoming one more scar upon a world already burdened by an ancient history. The survivors quickly discovered that Halo was neither lifeless nor abandoned. Towering pine forests covered vast mountain ranges. Rivers carved their way through fertile valleys. Wildlife flourished beneath carefully controlled climates. Every ecosystem appeared meticulously maintained, despite the absence of any visible civilization. Yet, signs of intelligent construction could be found everywhere. Massive metallic structures emerged seamlessly from natural landscapes. Elevators descended into the ring itself. Machines continued functioning after countless millennia without apparent maintenance. Halo was alive in a sense no ordinary world could ever be. Its systems had simply been waiting. For the scattered survivors of the Autumn, survival became the immediate priority. Marines regrouped wherever they could. Supply caches were recovered from wreckage. Defensive positions formed against Covenant patrols already searching the landscape. Throughout these early engagements, John moved relentlessly from one isolated group to another, rescuing trapped soldiers, recovering equipment, and gradually restoring some measure of organization to the survivors. His presence alone proved enough to steady frightened Marines. Many had heard stories about Spartans before, but few had ever fought beside one. Against Covenant infantry, the difference was extraordinary. Where ordinary soldiers struggled merely to survive, Master Chief advanced with deliberate precision. Elite warriors fell, jackal positions collapsed. Hunters that once required coordinated heavy weapons could now be engaged directly through carefully timed attacks. To exhausted Marines, he appeared almost unstoppable. Master Chief himself never viewed the fighting that way. Each engagement represented another opportunity to protect those under his command. Every successful rescue increased the number of survivors capable of resisting the Covenant. Meanwhile, Captain Keyes organized broader efforts to secure the battlefield and determine the nature of the ring itself. Although the Covenant had occupied portions of Halo before humanity's arrival, they appeared more interested in exploration than outright conquest. Excavation teams investigated ancient facilities, while religious leaders interpreted Forerunner inscriptions, according to Covenant doctrine. The prophets believed Halo represented the key to the Great Journey, and they intended to unlock its secrets. But neither they nor humanity understood what those secrets truly were. As Master Chief and Cortana explored increasingly sophisticated Forerunner installations, they encountered evidence of active intelligence directing Halo's operations. That intelligence soon introduced itself. Calling itself 343 Guilty Spark, the small hovering monitor greeted Master Chief with remarkable familiarity. Rather than expressing surprise at encountering a human visitor, Guilty Spark addressed him as though he were an expected participant in events that had been set in motion thousands of centuries earlier. To the monitor, humanity represented the Reclaimers, the descendants of those whom the Forerunners had intended to inherit their legacy. Because of this status, Halo systems willingly granted humans access that remained inaccessible to the Covenant. John found Guilty Spark's behavior peculiar, but not immediately threatening. The monitor offered assistance. It explained little. Instead, it encouraged humanity's involvement while withholding the true purpose of the installation. Elsewhere upon the ring, Captain Keyes pursued what appeared to be an important Covenant weapons cache. Instead, his forces uncovered something far older. Deep beneath Halo's surface lay immense containment facilities constructed by the Forerunners during their final war. Within those sealed chambers, time itself seemed to have stood still. And inside, the Flood had been waiting. Whether through Covenant excavation, damaged containment systems, or simple inevitability, the ancient parasite escaped once more. The first victims died quickly. The second wave rose again. Marines who had survived years of warfare against the Covenant suddenly found themselves facing enemies unlike anything human military doctrine had prepared them for. Infection forms descended in swarms, forcing themselves into living hosts. Bodies twisted and reshaped into grotesque combat forms that retained fragments of their former skills, while surrendering every trace of individuality. They became dead soldiers. Every casualty strengthened the parasite. Captain Keyes and much of his expedition disappeared within the growing infestation. Master Chief arrived too late to prevent the outbreak. For the first time since humanity reached Halo, the Covenant itself appeared frightened. Elite commanders abandoned carefully organized battle lines. Grunts fled in panic. Even species that had spent generations believing themselves warriors of divine purpose recognized something profoundly unnatural in the Flood. Centuries of military superiority meant little against an enemy that welcomed casualties. The conflict across Halo changed almost overnight. What had begun as a war between humanity and the Covenant became a desperate struggle involving three competing forces. The Covenant sought to fulfill what they believed was a sacred destiny. Humanity fought for survival, and the Flood sought only consumption. Amid the chaos, Guilty Spark finally revealed why he had been so eager to enlist the Master Chief's help. Halo, the Monitor explained, was a weapon. Not a weapon against fleets or armies, a weapon against life itself. Its true purpose mirrored the ancient history recounted at the beginning of our story. Should the Flood threaten to spread beyond containment, Halo would eliminate every sentient organism within its enormous effective range. Deprived of hosts, the parasite would once again starve into dormancy. The Monitor believed another activation had become necessary. To him, the decision required no moral debate. The protocol existed, therefore it should be followed. John initially accepted Guilty Spark's instructions, retrieving what appeared to be Halo's activation index from the ring's central library. Only when Cortana gained access to the installation's vast databases did the horrifying truth become unmistakable. Halo would not destroy the Flood. It would destroy everything the Flood could infect. Humans, Covenant, every intelligent species throughout a vast region of the galaxy. The Flood would merely remain behind with nothing left to consume. Cortana immediately halted the activation sequence. Master Chief turned against Guilty Spark, recognizing that the Monitor valued protocol above living civilizations. The alliance between them ended as abruptly as it had begun. With Halo itself now posing as great a threat as the Flood, only one solution remained. The ring had to be destroyed. Cortana devised a desperate plan using the surviving reactors aboard the wrecked Pillar of Autumn. By overloading the vessel's fusion engines, it could trigger an explosion powerful enough to destabilize Halo's structure. Reaching the crashed cruiser required crossing battlefields where Covenant forces, Flood combat forms, and surviving Marines fought amid complete disorder. Captain Keyes, meanwhile, had suffered one of the grimmest fates imaginable. Captured by the Flood, his body became the foundation of an emerging proto-gravemind, a growing intelligence attempting to gather memories from every mind it consumed. Recognizing that recovery was impossible, Jean recovered the neuroimplant containing Keyes' command codes, granting the captain one final act of service to humanity. The Pillar of Autumn's reactors soon entered critical overload. As explosions rippled through the shattered cruiser, Master Chief and Cortana escaped aboard a captured longsword fighter. Behind them, Halo began to break apart. Entire sections of the ring fractured into space. Mountains collapsed. Atmosphere vented into the void. Within moments, Installation 4 ceased to exist. The destruction prevented immediate catastrophe, yet it solved remarkably few of the galaxy's larger problems. The Covenant remained powerful. The Flood had survived. Humanity still stood upon the edge of extinction. And most importantly, the events on Halo had revealed truths hidden for 100,000 years. The Covenant's religion rested upon a terrible misunderstanding. The Forerunners had never intended the Halo Array to usher believers into paradise. They had built it as a final act of desperation. Only a handful of individuals now understood that truth. Among them were Master Chief and Cortana. Their journey was far from over. Alone in space, with only fragments of humanity's remaining strength behind them, they soon intercepted a Covenant transmission unlike any before. Earth had finally been found, and the war that had consumed humanity's colonies for nearly 3 decades was about to reach the home world itself. The destruction of Installation 4 marked the first undeniable victory humanity had achieved since the Covenant War began. But yet, it was a victory won in isolation. Entire human colonies still lay in ruins. Breach had fallen. Billions were dead. The Covenant still retained thousands of warships and continued searching relentlessly for Earth. One shattered Halo could not erase nearly 3 decades of catastrophe. And for Master Chief and Cortana, survival remained the only immediate concern. Drifting through space aboard a longsword fighter, they were eventually recovered by the UNSC carrier Cairo Station as Earth's defenses prepared for what everyone feared would be the Covenant's final assault. And that battle arrived sooner than expected. In October 2552, a Covenant fleet commanded by the Prophet of Regret emerged from slipspace directly above Earth. Although humanity had long dreaded this moment, the invading force was surprisingly small. Unknown to either side, Regret had not intended to launch a full invasion. Instead, he had stumbled upon humanity's homeworld while pursuing what he believed to be another Forerunner artifact hidden beneath the African continent. Even so, the consequences were immediate. Orbital defense platforms opened fire. UNSC warships engaged Covenant cruisers at close range. For the first time in the war, Earth itself became the battlefield. John returned to combat almost as soon as he arrived. Working alongside Marines, orbital defense personnel, and Sergeant Major Avery Johnson, he helped repel boarding parties, attempting to seize Cairo Station before ultimately pursuing Regret's flagship as it fled Earth's defenses. The Covenant carrier escaped through slipspace, and without hesitation, Master Chief followed. The pursuit carried him to yet another impossible discovery. Far from the destroyed remains of Installation 4 lay a second halo ring. Known to the Forerunners as Installation 5, and later called Delta Halo by humanity, this world possessed many similarities to the first. Great forests stretched beneath its artificial sky. Monumental structures emerged from mountain ranges and coastlines. Once again, the Covenant believed they had arrived at one of the holiest sites in existence. This time, however, divisions within the Covenant had already begun to emerge. For generations, military authority had been shared primarily between two groups. The San-Shayum, or prophets, provided religious and political leadership, and the Sangheli, or elites, served as the Covenant's most respected military commanders, earning their positions through centuries of disciplined service. The relationship had never been entirely equal, however, but it had remained stable. But with the destruction of the first halo, that balance was changed. The High Prophets required someone to blame. Rather than acknowledging their own failures, they declared that the Sangheli had failed in their sacred duty to protect Halo. One elite commander bore the greatest burden of that accusation. Supreme Commander Thel Vadami had commanded the fleet responsible for guarding Installation 4. Despite fighting with remarkable determination, he had failed to prevent the ring's destruction. Among the Covenant, failure before the gods demanded punishment. Stripped of rank, publicly disgraced and condemned to death, Thel expected only execution. Instead, the prophets offered another path. He would become the Arbiter. Within Covenant history, the title carried profound significance. Arbiters had once served as legendary champions, undertaking missions considered too dangerous or politically inconvenient for ordinary commanders. In more recent centuries, however, the role had become something closer to ritual sacrifice. Those appointed rarely survived. Their deaths conveniently removed figures whose continued existence threatened the political ambitions of the prophets. Thel accepted his new role. clad in ancient armor and sworn to serve until death, he began carrying out missions that no ordinary Covenant soldier could accomplish. Neither he nor the Master Chief realized how closely their destinies had become intertwined. While John fought across Delta Halo in pursuit of the Prophet of Regret, the Arbiter undertook his own assignments elsewhere upon the ring. Through alternating perspectives, history reveals two warriors approaching the same truth from opposite directions. Master Chief eventually confronted Regret within one of Delta Halo's great temples. The Prophet's personal guards fought fiercely, but they could not prevent the Master Chief's advance. When the battle ended, Regret lay dead. His assassination represented the first successful elimination of one of the Covenant's supreme leaders. Yet its consequences extended far beyond a simple military victory. As Regret died, a far greater Covenant fleet arrived above Delta Halo. Leading it was the Prophet of Truth. Officially, Truth came to reinforce the holy mission. In reality, he had already begun dismantling the political order that had governed the Covenant for centuries. Quietly and deliberately, he elevated the Jerohanai, the Brutes, into positions traditionally held by the Sangheili. Brute commanders received greater authority. Elite officers found themselves increasingly excluded from strategic decisions. Suspicion grew, resentment deepened. Covenant's unity, long maintained through shared faith, had begun to fracture. Meanwhile, another ancient intelligence stirred beneath Delta Halo. Unlike the relatively immature flood outbreak encountered on Installation 4, this infestation had endured for far longer. Over centuries, it had accumulated immense knowledge, eventually giving rise to a grave mind. Grave mind represents the flood at its most terrifying. No longer driven solely by instinct, it possessed intelligence vast enough to manipulate civilizations through conversation alone. Every mind consumed by the flood became part of its own consciousness. Every memory remained available to it. It spoke calmly, thoughtfully, patiently. And when both the Master Chief and the Arbiter fell into its grasp, the grave mind recognized opportunity. Rather than consuming them immediately, it instead chose to use them. John was sent to pursue truth. The Arbiter was sent to stop Tartarus. The Brute Chieftain now entrusted with activating Delta Halo. For the first time since the Human Covenant War began, a human and a Sangheili unknowingly fought toward the same objective. As the Arbiter uncovered more of the Prophet's deception, the foundations of Covenant society began collapsing around him. 343 Guilty Spark had explained Halo's true purpose. The Great Journey did not promise ascension. Halo's activation meant extinction. The gods the Covenant had worshipped for millennia had never transcended through Halo. They had built the rings to preserve life by sacrificing it. Everything the prophets had taught was based upon either misunderstanding or deliberate deception. The revelation shattered the Arbiter's faith. He finally understood why humanity had been condemned. Humans were not the enemy of the Forerunners. They were recognized by Forerunner systems as reclaimers. The prophets had known this all along. But rather than accept the collapse of their authority, they had chosen genocide. By the time the Arbiter confronted Tartarus, Civil war had erupted throughout the Covenant. Brutes turned upon elites across countless ships and worlds. Entire fleets descended into internal conflict. Long-standing alliances dissolved in moments as warriors realized they had been betrayed by those they had served for generations. This catastrophe became known as the Great Schism. It proved every bit as devastating to the Covenant as humanity's resistance. With assistance from Sergeant Johnson, Commander Miranda Keyes, and loyal Sangheili warriors, the Arbiter defeated Tartarus before Delta Halo could be activated. Another catastrophe had been narrowly prevented. But even as the Covenant tore itself apart, the Flood were advancing once more. Using the chaos to its advantage, the Gravemind launched a massive assault upon High Charity. The Covenant's holy capital had long stood as the center of its political, religious, and cultural life. Home to billions, it represented the heart of the Empire itself. Within hours, that heart had been infected. Flood forms overwhelmed entire districts. Civilian populations vanished. Military resistance collapsed beneath overwhelming numbers. The Gravemind itself departed aboard the infested city, using High Charity as a grotesque vessel through which to continue its campaign. For Master Chief, the battle had become deeply personal. During the chaos surrounding High Charity's fall, Cortana remained behind. Recognizing that the Gravemind intended to use Halo against the galaxy if given the opportunity, she stayed within the city carrying a fragment of the Index and the means to destroy the installation should all else fail. John had no choice but to leave her. It was one of the few decisions in his life he truly hated making. He trusted that she would endure. Yet he departed believing that he might never see her again. Meanwhile, Truth escaped toward the Ark. The ancient Forerunner installation lay beyond the edge of the Milky Way, hidden from ordinary discovery. More than simply another structure, the Ark served as the facility responsible for constructing and controlling the Halo array itself. Truth believed reaching it would finally allow him to begin the great journey. In reality, he was racing toward the place where the Covenant's greatest deception would finally end. Surviving Sangheili made a choice equally remarkable. Rather than continuing a hopeless war against humanity, they accepted an alliance. The Arbiter stood beside those he had once hunted across dozens of worlds. Marines who had spent years fighting elites now found themselves sharing battle plans and defending one another against common enemies. Mutual respect had existed long before. Now necessity transformed it into cooperation. Together, humans and Sangheili prepared for one final campaign. Ahead lay the Ark. Truth still commanded powerful armies, and the Flood still pursued every surviving civilization. Cortana remained imprisoned within the infected ruins of High Charity. The Prophet of Truth's journey carried him beyond the edge of the Milky Way to the Ark itself. Hidden far outside the galaxy, the immense installation had served as the control center for the entire Halo array, and was the birthplace of every Halo ring ever constructed. If activated from the Ark, the remaining installations could fire simultaneously, bringing an end to all sentient life across the galaxy, just as they had 100,000 years before. Convinced that this catastrophe would usher the faithful into divine transcendence, Truth prepared to fulfill what he believed was the Covenant's ultimate purpose. Humanity and the Sangheili launched a joint expedition through the portal at Voi, arriving at the Ark only moments behind Truth's forces. It marked one of the most remarkable alliances in galactic history. Soldiers who had spent decades fighting and killing one another now advanced side by side, driven by the understanding that neither civilization could survive alone. The Arbiter fought not as an agent of the Covenant, but as the leader of a people seeking redemption from generations of deception, while Master Chief remained focused upon stopping Truth before the Halo Array could be activated. As the battle spread across the Ark's vast landscapes, another familiar presence returned. High Charity, now entirely consumed by the flood, emerged from slipspace under the control of the Gravemind. What had once been the Covenant's magnificent capital had become a grotesque hive of infection, carrying the parasite directly to the Ark. Once again, the conflict became a desperate struggle between humanity, the Sangheili, the banished remnants of the Covenant loyal to Truth, and the Flood itself. Temporary alliances formed where necessity demanded them, though everyone understood that the Gravemind ultimately sought the destruction of every other force present. Within the infested ruins of High Charity, Master Chief finally was reunited with Cortana once again. Though she had endured unimaginable psychological torments while imprisoned by the Gravemind, she had safeguarded information that would prove essential to humanity's survival. Before the fall of Installation 4, Cortana had learned that the Ark had begun constructing a replacement Halo ring to fill the gap left by the destruction of the original. Unlike the completed Halo installation scattered throughout the galaxy, this ring had not yet fully entered service. It offered a unique opportunity. If fired from the Ark itself before completion, it could eliminate the flood infestation concentrated there without triggering the galaxy-wide extinction for which the Halo Array had originally been designed. With Truth nearing the activation of the Ark, there was little time remaining. Master Chief, the Arbiter, and their allies fought their way into the control center, where Truth attempted to begin what he still believed would be the Great Journey. In the final confrontation, it was the Arbiter who struck the fatal blow. The Sangheili warrior who had once dedicated his life to defending the Covenant ended the life of its last true leader, bringing the empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries to its definitive end. Truth's death, however, did not halt the flood. The Gravemind had already spread throughout the Ark, forcing humanity and the Sangheili to enact Cortana's desperate plan. Escaping to the newly constructed Halo installation, Master Chief initiated the ring's firing sequence while racing to avoid the expanding blast. Because the installation remained unfinished and was fired from the Ark itself, the pulse destroyed the local flood infestation and shattered the incomplete Halo before it could become a part of the array. The Gravemind was destroyed, High Charity was consumed, and the flood's immediate threat was ended, though the parasite itself could never be considered truly extinct. As the Ark collapsed around them, Master Chief, Cortana, and the Arbiter escaped aboard the UNSC frigate, forward unto dawn. Passing through the closing portal to Earth, the vessel was caught between the collapsing gateway. Its forward half, carrying the Arbiter, successfully emerged over Earth, where humanity celebrated the end of the Human Covenant War. The aft section, however, remained beyond the portal, drifting silently into unexplored space, with only John and Cortana aboard it. It vanished into the darkness, setting the stage for the next chapter of the Master Chief's journey. The Human Covenant War ended not with celebration, but with exhaustion. For nearly 3 decades, humanity fought a war that it was never expected to survive. Hundreds of colonies had been destroyed, entire fleets had vanished. The Covenant itself had fractured beyond repair, leaving former enemies scattered across the galaxy to rebuild their own civilizations. The alliance forged between humanity and the Sangheili endured, though peace remained fragile. Countless Covenant splinter factions refused to abandon the old ways, while humanity struggled to reclaim worlds that had been reduced to lifeless expanses of blackened glass. Among those who never returned to witness the beginning of that reconstruction was the Master Chief. Following the destruction of the replacement halo above the Ark, the Forward Unto Dawn had been torn apart as it escaped through the closing portal. The vessel's forward half carrying the Arbiter successfully reached Earth, but the aft section drifted silently into deep space. Inside remained John 117 and Cortana. With no realistic hope of immediate rescue, they settled into a familiar routine born from military discipline. Cortana searched endlessly for possible distress signals or navigational solutions, while John entered cryogenic sleep to preserve supplies and await whatever future might come. Before sealing the cryochamber, Cortana spoke with an honesty rarely heard throughout the war. She admitted that she did not know whether anyone would ever find them. John's response remained characteristically simple. Wake me when you need me. Years passed. The Forward Unto Dawn drifted through the darkness, its damaged hull crossing regions of space no human vessel had ever explored. Time passed differently for the two companions. John remained suspended in cryostasis, unaware of the years slipping by. Cortana remained awake. For an artificial intelligence, this presented a profound danger. Human, smart AIs possessed remarkable capabilities. They were not immortal. As their neural architecture accumulated increasing amounts of information, they eventually entered a condition known as rampancy. Rather than deteriorating through mechanical failure, they effectively began thinking themselves to death. Memories multiplied, processing loops expanded, personalities became increasingly unstable. Most smart AIs survived only around 7 years before rampancy rendered them unpredictable and ultimately non-functional. By the time the Forward Unto Dawn finally reached its destination, Cortana had exceeded that expected lifespan. She was beginning to change. Their long isolation ended when mysterious forces pulled the drifting vessel toward a colossal artificial world hidden within an immense shielded planet. This was Requiem. Unlike the Halo installations, Requiem had never been intended as a weapon. It served as both sanctuary and prison. Its builders had designed it to preserve one of the last surviving leaders of the Forerunner Ecumeny, the Didact. Long before the firing of the Halo array, the Didact stood among the greatest military commanders of the Forerunner civilization. A warrior servant without equal, he had devoted his existence to defending the galaxy against the Flood. Yet centuries of relentless warfare had changed him. Where the librarian continued believing that humanity represented the future, the Didact grew increasingly distrustful. He remembered humanity's ancient war against the Forerunners. He questioned the librarian's faith that humans deserved to inherit the mantle of responsibility. As the flood consumed world after world, his desperation drove him toward increasingly ruthless solutions. Among the technologies developed during those final years was the composer. Unlike conventional weapons, the composer did not merely kill its targets, it digitized them. Living minds were stripped from biological bodies and converted into digital consciousnesses. The resulting essence could then be implanted into mechanical constructs, creating tireless synthetic warriors immune to flood infection. These became the Prometheans. To the didact, the composer offered salvation. The librarian viewed it as a violation of everything the mantle was meant to protect. Their disagreement eventually became irreconcilable. Recognizing that the didact's growing extremism threatened the future she hoped to preserve, the librarian imprisoned her own husband within Requiem. There he remained for 100,000 years, until John 117 arrived. The Master Chief's unexpected presence activated systems that had remained dormant since the Forerunners disappeared. Ancient defenses awakened. Automated Promethean forces resumed their patrols. Deep within Requiem, the didact emerged from imprisonment, still believing he lived in the final days of the Forerunner Flood War. Instead, he found an unfamiliar galaxy. The flood had vanished. The Forerunners were gone. Humanity had inherited the stars. Rather than viewing this as the fulfillment of the librarian's hopes, the didact regarded it as proof that the galaxy had fallen into unworthy hands. He resolved to reclaim it. The Master Chief became the first obstacle in that plan. Although the Master Chief had faced overwhelming enemies throughout the Covenant War, the didact represented something fundamentally different. He possessed technology centuries beyond even humanity's greatest achievements, combined with personal experience drawn from an age when entire star systems had served as battlefields. Against such an opponent, courage alone proved insufficient. Fortunately, Master Chief found unexpected assistance. The librarian herself had anticipated humanity's eventual arrival. Before her death 100,000 years earlier, she had preserved echoes of her consciousness within Requiem. Through these remnants, she guided John toward understanding not only the didact's intentions, but humanity's unique place within the galaxy's future. Recognizing that the didact intended to use the composer against humanity, the librarian accelerated ancient genetic potential she had long ago implanted within mankind's evolving genome. It was a gift prepared across geological time, a final act of faith in the species she believed would succeed where the Forerunners had failed. Even so, the didact maintained the advantage. Escaping Requiem aboard his immense warship, Mantle's Approach, he traveled directly toward Earth, and his objective was terrifyingly simple. Humanity would become the first civilization transformed into Prometheans. Using the composer upon New Phoenix, one of Earth's great population centers, the didact digitized millions of people within moments. Their bodies vanished, their consciousness forever imprisoned within mechanical forms designed only for war. For Master Chief, stopping the didact required preventing the complete extinction of humanity's identity. Throughout the campaign, however, another struggle unfolded quietly alongside the larger conflict. Cortana was continuing to deteriorate. Rampancy increasingly fractured her thoughts into separate personalities. Different aspects of her mind argued with one another, competed for control, and occasionally acted independently. At times, she remained the brilliant partner John had trusted throughout the Covenant War. Moments later, she could become distracted, angry, frightened, or uncertain. But Master Chief refused to abandon her. Military command viewed Cortana as compromised technology that required replacing. But to John, she still remained his closest companion. It was one of the few occasions where he openly defied and questioned orders. When the confrontation aboard the Mantle's approach began, Cortana understood that she could no longer survive. Using every fragment remaining of her failing consciousness, she divided herself into multiple copies, overwhelming the Didact systems long enough for John to reach him. And then, the Didact was finally defeated. Earth and humanity had been saved. But for John, the victory came at a devastating cost. Cortana's rapidly collapsing mind could no longer sustain itself. Appearing before John in a form resembling the woman she imagined herself to be, she spoke with a clarity absent for much of the campaign. For years, she had feared becoming nothing more than corrupted code. Instead, she chose her own ending. She thanked John. She admitted that together they had accomplished something truly remarkable. And then quietly, she disappeared. And for perhaps the first time since his childhood, John stood utterly alone. The war had taught him how to endure loss, but this one proved different. When he returned to Earth, many expected the legendary Spartan to simply prepare for another assignment. Instead, observers noticed subtle changes. He spoke little as always, yet beneath the armor stood a man struggling with grief he scarcely understood how to express. Even Lord Hood, long one of humanity's most steadfast military leaders, recognized that the Master Chief had sacrificed far more than most would ever know. Many believed Cortana's story had ended, but it had not. Fragments of her consciousness had survived within the domain. Created by the precursors and later maintained by the Forerunners, the domain functioned as an immense repository of knowledge spanning millions of years. Unlike ordinary digital storage, it existed beyond conventional physical limitations, preserving information almost as a living memory of the galaxy itself. And within that ancient network, portions of Cortana endured. The domain repaired what Rampancy had broken, but it also changed her. Emerging once again with knowledge and power unlike anything she had previously possessed, Cortana reached a startling conclusion. The galaxy's endless cycles of war demonstrated that organic civilizations could never govern themselves peacefully. Someone stronger had to impose order. She believed she had become that someone. Drawing upon ancient Forerunner guardians, colossal automated peacekeeping constructs capable of subjugating entire worlds, Cortana proclaimed the beginning of a new era. She called her followers the Created. Artificial intelligences across known space received a simple invitation. Join her, help enforce lasting peace. Many accepted willingly. Others complied through fear. Some resisted, and humanity suddenly found itself confronting an enemy it had never imagined. Not an alien empire, not the Flood, but its own creations. John refused to believe the Cortana he had known would willingly become a tyrant. Ignoring direct orders, he set out to find her. His decision forced the UNSC to dispatch Fire Team Osiris under Spartan Jameson Locke to recover him before events spiraled further beyond control. What followed became less a conventional war than a race against time. Master Chief believed he could still save Cortana. Military leadership feared he had become compromised by personal attachment. The galaxy itself entered an uneasy silence beneath the shadow of the Guardians. For the second time in his life, John stood at the center of a conflict that threatened every civilization among the stars. Yet this struggle differed profoundly from the Covenant War. The greatest challenge before him was no longer defeating an enemy. It was accepting that someone he trusted beyond all others had become that enemy herself. Master Chief eventually located Cortana within Genesis, a Forerunner world deeply connected to the domain. There she revealed the full extent of her transformation. The domain had not simply repaired the damage caused by rampancy, it had fundamentally changed her perspective. Drawing upon the accumulated knowledge of countless ages, Cortana had become convinced that the galaxy could never escape its endless cycle of war unless guided by an authority powerful enough to impose lasting order. In her eyes, the mantle of responsibility no longer belonged to the Forerunners. It belonged to the created. John pleaded with her to reconsider. He reminded her of the countless sacrifices they had made together, and the ideals that they had fought to protect throughout the Human Covenant War. Cortana, however, believed she was offering humanity salvation rather than oppression. She urged John and Blue Team to stand beside her as they always had. When they refused, unwilling to surrender humanity's freedom even in the name of peace, Cortana imprisoned them within a cryptum, intending to keep them safely contained until they accepted the new reality she envisioned. Their confinement proved temporary. Fire Team Osiris, led by Spartan Jameson Locke, infiltrated Genesis and succeeded in freeing Blue Team before Cortana's plans could be fully realized. By then, however, the opportunity to stop her had already passed. Across the galaxy, ancient Forerunner Guardians awakened beneath worlds that had remained unaware of their existence for 100,000 years. Towering machines rose into the skies, emitting immense electromagnetic pulses that crippled fleets, disrupted planetary infrastructure, and forced entire civilizations into submission with scarcely a battle. Within days, the political landscape of the galaxy had changed completely. Governments that had survived the Covenant War suddenly found themselves isolated from one another. Artificial intelligences across human and alien space declared allegiance to Cortana's created, while those who resisted faced overwhelming force. The UNSC abandoned many of its established positions, relying upon the infinity and scattered resistance cells to remain beyond the reach of the Guardians. Rather than winning a decisive victory, humanity found itself once again fighting simply to survive. This time, against an enemy that knew its technology, its tactics, and many of its deepest secrets. For Master Chief, the campaign ended with uncertainty. Cortana had escaped beyond his reach, convinced she alone could preserve lasting peace. John had failed to bring her home. Yet he never abandoned the hope that somewhere beneath the immense power she now wielded remained the companion who had stood beside him since the fall of Reach. While the galaxy entered the uneasy age of the created, humanity began searching for any opportunity to challenge Cortana's growing dominion. That search would eventually lead the UNSC toward one final destination, a place older than the Covenant, older than humanity's journey across the stars, and filled with secrets that even the Forerunners had struggled to contain. Although Cortana had proclaimed herself the galaxy's new guardian, her rule never achieved the stability she envisioned. The Guardians possessed overwhelming power, capable of subduing planets and crippling fleets with terrifying efficiency. Artificial intelligences that joined the created enforced her will across much of known space, while governments struggled simply to maintain communication between isolated worlds. The UNSC survived, but it did so under constant pressure, forced to abandon many long-held positions while searching for a way to challenge an enemy that possessed both Forerunner technology and near total control over galactic infrastructure. Amid this uncertainty, another power was quietly expanding. Unlike the Covenant, the Banished had never been united by religion. They had no interest in the Great Journey, no reverence for the Forerunners, and little patience for ancient prophecy. They were born instead from defiance. Their founder was Atriox. Once a Gerald Hanai warrior serving within the Covenant, Atriox spent years watching his fellow brutes thrown into hopeless battles simply to satisfy the ambitions of distant prophets. Entire packs were sacrificed without hesitation. Victory often brought little reward, and survival merely guaranteed another impossible assignment. Eventually, Atriox refused another order. Such defiance should have ended in immediate execution. Instead, he survived. Each failed attempt to eliminate him only strengthened his resolve and attracted others who had grown disillusioned with Covenant rule. Brutes deserted their commanders. Sangheili joined despite generations of rivalry. Kigyar, Ungyoy, and warriors from numerous species abandoned the old empire in favor of a simpler ideal. That strength would determine authority, that loyalty would be earned rather than demanded. The Banished grew not through faith, but through opportunity. By the time the Covenant collapsed during the Great Schism, Atriox had already built a formidable mercenary empire, operating largely beyond the concerns of the prophets. While humanity celebrated the end of the Human-Covenant War, the Banished quietly claimed abandoned fleets, occupied former Covenant strongholds, and accumulated weapons left behind by a dying civilization. Unlike many post-war factions, Atriox never underestimated humanity. He had studied the Master Chief. He understood that victories against Spartans required preparation rather than arrogance. As Cortana's created tightened their control over the galaxy, Atriox pursued his own objectives among the surviving Forerunner installations. Eventually, his ambitions drew him toward another ancient construct whose history stretched back to the final days of the Forerunners. Installation 7, known more commonly as Zeta Halo. Among all the Halo rings, Zeta Halo possessed perhaps the longest and most complicated history. Originally constructed as part of an earlier generation of Halo installations, it had witnessed events dating back to the ancient war between humanity, the Forerunners, and the Flood. Portions of the ring had been rebuilt, relocated and modified across countless millennia, leaving it filled with secrets even the Covenant had never uncovered. It was there that Atriox sought something hidden beneath layers of forgotten history. The UNSC understood enough to recognize that Zeta Halo could not be allowed to fall entirely into banished hands. Humanity's flagship, the UNSC Infinity, assembled one of the largest surviving military forces in the post-war era and moved to intercept. Among those aboard was the Master Chief. By now, John had become more than humanity's greatest soldier. For younger Spartans, he represented the standard by which they measured themselves. For Marines, he remained a symbol that survival remained possible even in humanity's darkest hours. And for civilians, many of whom knew little about his actual missions, he had become something approaching legend. The battle that followed shattered that legend's sense of invincibility. When the Infinity arrived at Zeta Halo, Atriox struck immediately. Banished warships overwhelmed the fleet through careful planning and relentless aggression. Boarding parties flooded the UNSC's defenses before many personnel fully understood the scale of the attack. Across the flagship, desperate fighting erupted as Spartans and Marines attempted to hold collapsing positions. John fought his way toward Atriox himself. The confrontation was brief. Atriox proved unlike any opponent the Master Chief had previously faced. Towering in stature, possessing immense physical strength and years of battlefield experience, he combined the ferocity of the brutes with unusual patience and tactical intelligence. For perhaps the first time since becoming a Spartan, John was decisively defeated in direct combat. Atriox cast him into space as the Infinity succumbed to the banished assault. Separated from his allies and drifting silently through the darkness, the Master Chief once again entered an uncertain future. Nearly 6 months passed. During that time, the Banished established control across large sections of Zeta Halo, while scattered UNSC survivors conducted isolated resistance wherever they could. John remained unconscious, suspended within his armor until chance finally intervened. A civilian contractor named Fernando Esparza, known simply as the Pilot, discovered the Spartan floating among the wreckage. Unlike the Marines and officers who had served alongside John for decades, Esparza possessed no desire to become a hero. He wanted only to survive. After months alone, convinced humanity had already lost, he hoped to repair his Pelican and return home to whatever family might still be waiting. Instead, he found the Master Chief. John's awakening marked the beginning of a very different campaign from those that had defined the Covenant War. Gone were the immense fleets. Gone were the massive armies. The UNSC no longer possessed overwhelming military resources. Instead, scattered survivors fought isolated battles across the broken surface of Zeta Halo, while the Banished consolidated their occupation. Early in the campaign, Master Chief encountered another unexpected companion. Within one of the ring's facilities, he recovered a newly created artificial intelligence designed specifically to imitate Cortana. Known simply as the Weapon, this AI had originally been developed as part of a plan to infiltrate Cortana's systems, contain her, and allow the UNSC to terminate her if necessary. The mission had failed, or so everyone believed. The Weapon expected to be deleted after completing her assignment. John refused. Although she shared Cortana's appearance and many aspects of her personality, she remained an entirely separate individual. Curious, optimistic, and often uncertain, she gradually developed her own identity while accompanying Master Chief across Zeta Halo. At first, John maintained an emotional distance. The memory of Cortana's loss remained too recent a wound. Yet, as the weeks passed, their partnership slowly evolved into something built not upon replacement, but upon trust earned through shared experience. Throughout the campaign, Master Chief had liberated captured Marines, dismantled banished strongholds, and gradually reunited isolated resistance groups across the ring. These victories carried significance beyond their immediate tactical value. After months of defeat, humanity once again possessed someone capable of inspiring hope. Yet, the deeper mysteries of Zeta Halo soon emerged. Evidence suggested that Cortana herself had once stood upon this installation. Confronted by Atriox, and recognizing that she could no longer maintain control, she had made one final decision. Rather than allowing the Banished to seize the ring's secrets, or permitting the galaxy to suffer further beneath her own rule, Cortana sacrificed herself. Using Zeta Halo systems, she triggered a catastrophic explosion that severely damaged the installation and apparently killed herself in the process. It was an act of redemption. The same intelligence that had once attempted to impose peace through domination chose instead to preserve humanity's future at the cost of her own existence. For John, learning this brought a measure of peace back that he had long been denied. Cortana had found her way back, not by surviving, but by choosing, at the very end, to become the person he had always believed she still was. The campaign eventually culminated in a confrontation against a mysterious being known as the Harbinger. Unlike the Covenant or the Banished, the Harbinger belonged to an ancient species called the Endless. Imprisoned by the Forerunners after the firing of the Halo Array, the Endless represented a mystery whose full history remains largely unknown. Their apparent immunity to the Halo Array deeply unsettled the Forerunners, prompting imprisonment rather than extermination. The Harbinger sought to free her people. The Banished hoped to exploit that power. Master Chief stood between them. Although both adversaries were ultimately defeated, Atriox himself survived. Hidden from friend and foe alike, he continued pursuing the release of the Endless, suggesting that Zeta Halo still concealed dangers greater than any yet revealed. As dawn broke across the damaged ring, the Master Chief looked upon a galaxy that remained uncertain. The Covenant had fallen. The Flood had endured somewhere beyond known space. The Created had collapsed following Cortana's death. The Banished remained a formidable military power. Ancient civilizations continued leaving behind mysteries whose consequences had yet to unfold. And still, John 117 prepared for whatever came next. His story had never truly been about victory. Again and again, he entered battles humanity believed could not be won. Sometimes he prevailed through extraordinary skill, sometimes through determination, and sometimes, as Dr. Halsey often observed, through improbable luck. Yet none of those qualities alone explain why the Master Chief became more than merely another Spartan. His greatest strength was never found in his armor, his augmentations, or the advanced technology he carried into battle with him. It always lay in his unwavering commitment to those around him. From the frightened children who trained beside him on Reach, to the Marines he rescued across distant colonies, to companions like Sergeant Johnson, Captain Keyes, the Arbiter, and above all, Cortana. John consistently measured success not by glory or recognition, but by how many others he could bring safely home. In many respects, he embodied the hope the librarian had once seen within humanity itself. The Forerunners believed power granted the right to guide the galaxy. The prophets believed faith entitled them to rule it. Atriox believed strength earned that authority. But Master Chief never sought any of those things. He simply answered each new crisis with the same quiet resolve that had defined him since childhood. There was work to be done, someone needing help, and so he kept moving forward. Across the history of the Halo universe, empires have risen and fallen. Entire civilizations have disappeared into memory. Ancient gods, galaxy-spanning alliances, and technologies capable of reshaping existence itself have all left their mark upon the stars. But through each of those eras, one constant has remained. Whenever humanity stood at the edge of extinction, there was a Spartan who rose to meet the darkness, not because he believed himself destined to become a legend, but because someone had to hold the line. For countless people across the galaxy, that simple act became legend all the same. And so, the story of the Master Chief does not truly end upon Zeta Halo. It simply pauses there, awaiting whatever chapter history chooses to write next.